Welcome back. So we're still in the national bestseller, Salvation, Black People and Love, written by Bell Hooks, and we're in chapter 4, Valuing Ourselves Rightly. So of course I'm editing and jumping around, and I definitely expect you to buy this book or check it out of a library, because that's why I give you a taste of things for you to pursue your own education, right? Jumping in. We live in a society where we're daily confronting negative images of blackness. It takes courage and vigilance to create a context where self-love can emerge. When I recognized that black folks were collectively losing ground when it came to the practice of self-love in a collection of essays, Black Looks, Race and Representation, I advocated that we renew anti-racist struggles in ways that we would focus on loving blackness. In the essay called Loving Blackness as Political Resistance, I called attention to the reality that to end white supremacy, we must create the conditions not only for black people to love blackness, but for everyone else to love blackness. All black folks who love blackness recognize that it's not enough for us to be decolonized, that the non-black folks we work with, who teach our children and so on, need consciousness raising that will enable them to see blackness differently. I concluded this essay by stating, quote, collectively, black people and our allies in struggle are empowered when we practice self-love as a revolutionary intervention that undermines practices of domination. Loving blackness as political resistance transforms our ways of looking and being, and thus creates the conditions necessary for us to move against the forces of domination and death and reclaim black life, end quote. Loving blackness is more important than gaining access to material privilege. We know that many successful black people have assimilated white supremacist thinking and feel themselves and other black people to be unworthy, even though they may live and act as though they are the exception to the rule. The issue of loving blackness goes beyond the question of race. Focus on racist assaults on black self-esteem has often caused us to ignore the impact of class. Even though we know that masses of black people are poor, we have often not linked the perpetuation of low self-esteem among non-privileged groups to the way all poor people are looked down upon in this society and treated accordingly. When an overwhelming majority of black people were poor because racial segregation denied us access to jobs and economic advancement, in our communities, poverty was not a source of shame. Indeed, families often approach lack from a global perspective, relating their experience of material lack to that of folks in other countries. Since religion taught us that God loved the poor and the oppressed, we understood that to live simply, whether one had freely chosen that lot or not, was to live in harmony with the divine will. Yeah, I think also going beyond this is like we shame people for poverty, especially in the US, not acknowledging the fact that poverty is a policy choice, that people are choosing to give people low wages, and that I don't want to go to the extreme of glorifying poverty. I think people should have sufficient to eat. Jesus himself was always feeding people, healing them, making sure they had what they need. So I'm not advocating for the divinity of poverty, but the recognition that is a policy choice and people should not be ashamed of being poor, because these are policies, especially racist policies, being made to harm people. In the past, by not attaching negative stigma to material lack, black people effectively refused to allow material status to determine substantive value. In our churches, we were constantly taught that being rich was not a virtue, that it was more virtuous to love one's neighbor and to share resources, that greed was sin, as The church started to become a site for class mobility as churches evolved from places of worship to corporations, institutions requiring more money. These values were no longer emphasized when this reality was coupled with a turning away from religious teachings as a practical guide for one's life. Black folks of all classes began to buy into capitalist consumer thinking, which equated worth with material status and spread the message that you are what you buy. I have to pause here, and she's totally right in this. Like, rich, you're rare, says Kendrick Lamar is pointing out the delusion of saying because you're rich, you're rare, instead of you happen to have stuff, but that doesn't make you better than anyone. And we don't want to shame you for having stuff either, but it's not a virtue. It does not make you better, and loving each other used to be more important, and it should come back in style. You are what you buy. The mass media, which had, for the most part, ignored the poor, showing us mostly the fictional lifestyles of the rich, began to tell everyone that to be poor was to be nothing. More than racial assault, which black folks were quick to recognize and resist, this type of thinking was demoralizing. It was also terribly dangerous. It helped create a social climate in poor and destitute black communities where individuals were willing to rob, beat, and kill one another for material items. It helped lay the groundwork for the acceptance of a drug-based capitalist dog-eat-dog culture in poor communities where non-market values like sharing resources and neighborliness, which were once the norm, had been ridiculed, mocked, and all but erased. It also laid the groundwork for unprecedented levels of petty envy and hostilities in communities where folks had once been bounded by respect for shared circumstances rooted in hardship. Yeah, and that kind of petty envy and maliciousness kind of makes it hard for people who have to live among people who don't, like they used to in the past, because now they become victims that people prey on rather than community members that we can love and support. Usually folks blame drugs for the moral breakdown in poor communities, but drugs, hard and soft, have always been present in black life. The social context in which they were once used was one that emphasized pleasure, not escape from dehumanization and pain. When poor and destitute people of any race are made to feel that they really have no right to exist because they lack the material goods that give life meaning, it is this immoral climate that sets the stage for widespread addiction. In recent years, when poverty has been depicted as a crime against humanity, poor people of all races have been seen as criminals and treated accordingly, and this is getting worse in 2025. This demoralization shames. It creates depression, despair, and the dangerous, life-threatening nihilism black leaders talk about. It lays the emotional groundwork for widespread addiction. Addiction is not about relatedness, hence it destroys community. It creates a predatory culture, one where individuals regard each other with fear and loathing. In black families where addictions to drugs like heroin, cocaine, and crack prevail, bonds of affection and care are daily destroyed. Addiction knows no class. While materially privileged, black people are able to deny and cover up the negative impact of substance abuse on their family life. Emotional devastation is more readily visible in the lives of the poor and underclass. We know drug-addicted parents of all classes often neglect and abuse children, at times making them the object of profound, brutal rage. There are few places where this woundedness is attended to, where the post-traumatic stress individuals endure is addressed in a healing therapeutic environment. Such environments would not solve the problems of poverty, but they would address the underlying issues of self-esteem and self-love. One can be poor and still be self-loving. A huge majority of successful Black people who came from poor and or working class background know this truth. Just as material privilege will not ensure that any of us will be self-loving, poverty does not create low self-esteem and self-hatred. Until Black people of all classes are willing to challenge negative attitudes towards the poor, greed will continue to be the force that ravishes all of our diverse communities. Greed is sanctioned by those at the top of our class hierarchies and trickles down. The money doesn't trickle down, but the greed does. The rich who condone exploitation, murder, and slavery in order to maintain their wealth are no different from the poor who prey on one another in order to satisfy material longing. Greed manufactures hate without challenging the politics of materialist greed. We cannot create the climate in Black life that will allow for us to embrace non-market values. From experience, Black people know that no matter what our economic circumstance, we can create an environment that is permeated by a love ethic. Those of us who come from non-privileged backgrounds know this by heart because we felt the love in those places where material plenty was lacking. Love is especially available to us because it is a non-market value. We can create love wherever we are. Valuing ourselves rightly means we understand love to be the only foundation of being that will sustain us in both times of lack and times of plenty. Yeah, she did some preaching here. Yes, so there's the tension that we have and I've sensed it, and so many of us have sensed it. The elevation of the material, like struggle. People don't want struggle love. Nobody should be promoting Black people living in poverty, and poverty is different from a simple life. A lot of the material things, one of the biggest jokes for me during this administration was when China revealed that all these expensive bags that people are killing themselves for are just $40 bags at best. That we were putting value on things that are not intrinsically valuable. Meanwhile, taking away value from things that people who are intrinsically valuable. So yeah, I really see and really feel her when she's saying about how we have demonized poor people, and as a person who works in social service, I see that so much, how quick we are to attack poor people of not even wanting them to have basic things like food, not wanting people on food stamps to be able to buy a cake, birthday cake for their child. Like this kind of hate towards poor people, it's just overwhelming. Like, most people would like to have a living wage job. Most people, if they're able, would like to live in a nice home. Most people, but those are not the salaries that are being offered. So yeah, we're devaluing each other and accepting these materialistic, selfish, individualistic ideas. But I'm going to get off the soapbox, and you tell me what you think. Thanks so much for listening.